perhaps South Wales and southwest England. So feeling pretty warm in that sunshine. It'll cloud over a bit this evening over central and then southern Scotland, and we'll see more clouds spilling in across eastern parts of England overnight. But again, most places are going to have a dry night with clear spells. Just a hint of blue on the chart there. Perhaps in some rural spots, again across Scotland, temperatures may dip down close to freezing. So a bit of a chilly start on Sunday morning, but again, most places having a fine day. It will be a cloudier day, perhaps across these eastern counties of England, but even here I suspect that cloud will break up a little bit as we go through the day and we'll see sunny spells. And a brighter day over the highlands of Scotland and the Western Isles. Notice this breeze just coming in across these eastern coastal counties of England. That is going to bring a fresher feel and generally not as warm on Sunday. Slightly lower the temperatures tomorrow, but still in the south likely to get up to 20 degrees, maybe more. Monday also set fair. Again, a little cooler perhaps, but still some sunshine for most of us. Goodbye.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning with Holly and Phil. Oops, no, I mean Esther and Phil, and that's Phil Davis I'm talking about. What a morning it has been. So loads coming up, including reaction to Philip Schofield's bombshell. He's quit ITV after admitting he had an affair with a younger male ITV employee and lied to cover it up. Showbiz journalist Sarah Robertson will tell all.
Also this morning, the half-term holiday has officially begun, but the roads are already chocker, while Heathrow has cancelled a load of flights. We'll be joined by travel and aviation expert Sally Gethin to get the latest.
Plus, have we lost faith in the police? We'll be speaking to two people with two very differing points of view.
And has the vegan bubble burst? We'll be joined by ex-Hollyoaks actress Davinia Taylor to talk about healthy, balanced diets after her weight loss journey.
And as always, we want to hear from you, so do get involved in the show. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet us at gbnews. But first, your news headlines with Tatiana.
Esther, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. ITV says it's deeply disappointed by the admissions of deceit made by Philip Schofield. The TV presenter resigned yesterday after admitting he had an affair with a young male colleague, which he described as unwise but not illegal. He told the Daily Mail he lied about the relationship to his wife, colleagues, friends and agents. Mail on Sunday journalist Charlotte Griffith says people in the industry must have known.
There was a video of him having lunch in a cafe with this young man, although I think he was 18 at the time. So it was the worst kept secret. You have to take him at his word. You know, Holly must have asked him about this. People around him must have asked him about this, and he must have lied. That's what he said, and that's all we know right now.
Air passengers trying to get away for the bank holiday are facing delays because of a nationwide problem affecting e-gates. Heathrow Airport says it's aware of the issue, which is having an impact on a number of ports. The gates are operated by Border Force. The UK's biggest airport says it's working to manage queues, and efforts are being made to resolve the problem as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, passengers at the port of Dover are also experiencing delays following a French computer outage. The issue has now been fixed, but traffic chaos continues, with the port warning of waiting times of over 1 hour. It's after the RAC estimated around 19.2 million car trips will be made over the bank holiday weekend. The Post Office has issued an apology for using racist slurs in the investigation of wrongly accused postmasters involved in the Horizon IT scandal. A Freedom of Information request uncovered a document from 2008 where fraud investigators were asked to categorise suspects based on racial features, including use of a racist term referring to individuals of African descent. The Post Office condemned the language as abhorrent. The electric bike ridden by two teenagers before they were killed in a crash was an early birthday present. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans were killed in Cardiff while riding an e-bike. Following a community vigil for the pair held yesterday afternoon, Harvey's aunt said next week he'd have turned 16. The police watchdog is investigating after CCTV footage emerged showing a police van following the teens before their deaths. NHS Scotland has paid more than £160 million in compensation to patients since 2018. Scottish Conservative Party says the health service settled 475 claims over the 4-year period. Some of the reasons for payouts included removing an ovary and testicle without consent or a patient having their eye glued shut. The Scottish Government says health boards must learn from the situation and make improvements. Detached homes account for nearly a third of home mover purchases. That's according to lending giant Halifax, which says the sales for this type of property rose from a quarter a decade ago. But they say semi-detached properties were the most popular in northern England, while flats came out on top in London. Property expert Christina Castellino told GB News the number of people buying detached homes have benefited from a rise in property prices.
This statistic is only for people that currently have a home already. So for a lot of these people, they've benefited from the rise in property prices. So they already have equity that they can carry forward. And again, if we just go back to, a lot of people are buying new builds, often the developer will actually pay the stamp duty. So there are incentives there.
And SpaceX has launched its latest rocket from Florida just after midnight.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
Falcon 9 is carrying a satellite into orbit which weighs nearly 10,000 pounds. The launch of the satellite will help provide TV and broadcast services in the Middle East, Europe and North Africa. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Tatiana. Now, Philip Schofield has quit ITV after admitting he had an affair with a younger male employee and lied to cover it up.
The ex This Morning host says the relationship with his junior colleague was unwise but not illegal. In a statement to the Daily Mail, Schofield revealed he had met the man when he was a teenager and was asked to help him to get into television.
He's apologised for lying to colleagues, employers, the media and the public. An ITV spokesperson says they're deeply disappointed by the admissions of deceit made by Schofield and confirmed it's cut all ties with the host.
Let's get reaction from Showbiz journalist Sarah Robertson. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously an explosive revelation last night. Is there any more to come out? Is there much more to come out? Is this going to be a story that runs and runs and runs, or is this the long and short of it?
Good morning to you, Esther and Phil. Great to be back on with you today. This is a very dark day in ITV's history, a very dark day indeed. As you've just said there, we've heard what's come forward. Philip himself issued a mea culpa last night to say that he had lied to his family, lied to bosses, and lied to his own talent agency, YMU, about his relations with a former This Morning employee. But what has emerged since from your own colleague, Eamon Holmes, who's gone on to say that there was at least 4 executives very high up within the channel who knew about this relationship and knew of the claims against Schofield, but never once took action. That's Eamon's words. Now, ITV are trying to distance themselves and saying that they didn't know, but there are some very difficult questions for Dame Carolyn McCall now in the days to come of just how much did bosses really know. People, the public are asking questions. Social media was a hotbed of stories and allegations last night to say, can really all of those people who were working at a high end with Philip Schofield and knew that this young lad who was there and then suddenly disappeared off to loose women very quickly did not know that something had been going on. So there was many more questions to be asked, and also questions about Holly Willoughby as well. We saw when Philip made his very public coming out on the sofa, Holly was there holding his hand. People are asking, how much did Holly know? She went on holiday with Philip and his family. And then obviously we've seen their fallout in the last few weeks, and that has prompted viewers and members of the public and the press to ask, is there something more going on behind the scenes? And what has caused this? So this story is set to run. It's not going to go away yet. There will be more revelations to come in the papers in the next few days.
So, Sarah, people could lose their jobs over this, from chief executives right the way down. I remember when sort of News of the World, I know it was a newspaper, I know it was over different issues, but that had to go as a paper. So will we see heads rolling, and will we see this show go?
People have said it might be time now for the whole show to be boycotted, taken off air and then rebranded and brought back with an entirely new team. Others, it's now starting to look like a stink of maybe a cover-up. This is what people are now questioning. Have people covered up these allegations? Why has it taken until now for Philip to leave? He originally had the backing of his ITV bosses. Kevin Lygo backed him when he stepped down. We saw that Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary this week when they took over the helm with Holly being off. I mean, they looked like they had a gun put against their heads. when they had to issue a statement to say Philip was such a fantastic broadcaster and one of the best live broadcasters Britain's ever had. Oh, it's all looking very, very murky now. And this is just not going to go away. It's a very damaging look for ITV. As you've just said, Esther, questions are being asked. People want to know what is being going on and expect some high profile, maybe resignations or maybe more in the next few days.
I know he's apologised again to his wife who was very supportive when he came out and he outed, and she held his hand on the studio and his children were there. Have we heard any more from his wife about this?
No, we haven't yet. Stephanie has acted with absolute dignity during this whole saga, and it's actually Stephanie Phillips' long-suffering wife and his family that I feel most sorry for and who I have sympathy for right now. It must be absolutely awful for them to be hearing this, to be learning about this, to know that they have been deceived in this way and lied to, and that must be highly upsetting. And then obviously to see it play out in the media the way that it is. So I have every sympathy for his wife and for his children.
Sarah Robertson, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. As you say, this story is set to get bigger, and we'll be bringing it as it continues to unfold.
Difficult to see the chief executive of ITV seeing the next week out.
I would say that. I'd say it's a matter of days now for the chief executive there and other people, because they're going to have to draw a line. They're going to have to say this is definitively it. That's why I gave an example with the News of the World newspaper. It was gone.
Now, it's the big half-term and bank holiday getaway. However, plans are being scuppered for thousands due to British Airways flight cancellations and security officer strikes at Heathrow.
The roads are also chocker, with the RAC predicting the busiest late May bank holiday since 2019. Travellers at the port of Dover are facing delays after a French computer outage earlier on. So to bring us up to speed, pardon the pun, we're joined now by travel and aviation expert Sally Gethin. So the roads, the railways, chaos. Are we expecting chaos this bank holiday?
Well, it could be chaos, definitely, depending on how many people take to the road. So 19 million leisure trips by car are predicted for over the bank holiday weekend. The advice is to, stagger those trips if you can. But, I mean, the weather is fantastic, so everybody wants that getaway. At the port of Dover yesterday, cars were being held up, but the coaches were getting through. If you recall, at Easter, there were long 15-hour delays with coaches. But the port of Dover has put a lot of contingency measures in place to deal with that. And with the trains, well, that's yet to unfold, because we've had a brief hiatus this weekend of no strikes, but from next week, ASLEF, the train drivers, are going to go on strike, and they're going to be joined by the RMT later in the week. And this will hit next Saturday. The FA Cup, if you recall, is taking place then. So there'll be a lot of disruption after this weekend on the transport network.
And I suppose the only consolation, if you're trying to get away and your plane's cancelled at Heathrow, is that the weather's so good here, isn't it? You don't really need to jet off to Spain or Portugal or anywhere
but not if you've booked a flight and you want to go away. What's happening at Heathrow and with BA?
So BA has had to cancel hundreds of flights due to an IT outage. I mean, I've lost count of the IT outages at BA that I've covered in my work. And so it's almost a seasonal event that BA has an IT glitch, and they kind of hunker down and they don't really give out much information. We're all left guessing where that's occurring, but it's occurring at check-in and also departures. And on top of that, Unite, the union, which provides security workers at Heathrow, they have at least 2,000 workers there. They're about to, some of them are coming to the end of a 3-day strike, which finishes at the end of today. But also, Unite has got a new mandate from 600 more security workers, and they're promising more action, disruption over the summer, because they're complaining about Heathrow's dismissive attitude, saying the bosses get like 6-figure sums there, and they're well below even their counterparts at other London airports in terms of pay.
Now, in terms of aeroplanes, we saw on the news yesterday the extraordinary pictures of somebody opening the door on a South Korean flight just before the plane landed. Fortunately, it seems that nobody was hurt, but that person's been
you and I
arrested.
Couldn't believe that they could even open the door.
How does that happen, Sally? Because I mean, if you go on the train anywhere, you can't open the door until the train comes to a close. How is it possible, technically, for people to open a door while the plane's still flying?
I just want to put a note of reassurance out there for everybody. Normally, in normal circumstances, you cannot open a plane door in flight, not when it's coming into land even, as happened yesterday, or even at cruising altitude. At cruising altitude, the physics absolutely prevent it anyway because it's a pressurised cabin. It's like if you tried to open that door in flight cruising altitude, even if you could get it open, it's like pushing against 6 cars on the other side. That won't happen. It's an Airbus A321 that was affected in this instance, and it's a very reliable plane. Occasionally, there are these instances of a passenger losing it, right, and then going for that door. It's usually due to a severe mental health episode, because obviously that's not normal activity. It does happen, you know, there's been another incident in the United States in March where it involved violence against a flight attendant as well, but it's extremely rare. The challenge for the aerospace industry that designs planes, for example, they make them as robust as possible, put all the safety checks in. But, you know, there's always, as time goes on, some new human factor that challenges that. For example, you know, with the cockpit doors, they used to be open in the past, and now they're secured. So there will be more scrutiny on this, but it's possible it was a technical issue, an aircraft maintenance issue. It certainly is not standard for any airplane door to, well, unless you're, you know, it's a little general aviation plane, you know, a 2-seater or something, and you're going to parachute out of it. But for a commercial airline, that's not.
Well, you've reassured me there, because this was our conversation over dinner last night. How did that door get open?
I just don't understand why the pilot hasn't got the control and only releases the control when the plane comes to a standstill. And how a passenger has any say over this, Lord.
I suppose they'd say, should you need to in an emergency, but that's different. In an emergency, should the plane come to land, you know, you've got an emergency exit, they put the chute, and obviously you've got to get out of the plane.
Yeah, at that point.
So I get that. At that point, Sally, you're quite right. At that point, not when you're in air. But Sally, can we thank you for bringing us up to speed of what's going on and reassuring us about plane doors?
We'll still be discussing it tonight.
Wear your seatbelt in flight, because that's what ultimately saved these passengers.
Going to say, absolutely. It's a good advert for that, isn't it? Absolutely.
Yes, it is, because they say keep your seatbelt on, so absolutely.
We now know why.
Yeah. Now, look, still to come on the show, we've got our punchy panel who'll be talking about what's in the newspapers, more, obviously, on Philip Schofield as it comes. And we'll be asking the question, have you lost faith in the police, particularly after Wayne Couzens, after David Carrick, and also how lily-livered the police are when they're dealing with Just Stop Oil protesters. So see you after the short break.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
News, the people.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. The time now is 10:22. So let's take a look at the top stories of the day. We're delighted to be joined in the studio by former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lazar and former MEP and Director of Academy of Ideas, Claire Fox. Great to have you here. Well, who should I start with? Should I start with you, Claire? Ladies first.
Yeah, I'm
If we're still allowed to say that.
We don't care on this station. because
GB
we
News you
believe
can.
in free speech. If anybody's got a problem with ladies
You
first,
can't
well,
say it's
do
on the
one.
BBC, but you're in a safe space.
I'm saying
Do you
nothing.
have a problem with it, Claire?
I'd just like to say, as a baroness, I am Lady Fox, aren't I?
Yes, of
Yes,
course you are.
thank
Yes.
you very
There we go.
Absolutely.
Know your
Very
place, as they say. Know your place. Right. Actually,
I'll doff my
despite this hilarity, I'm starting with a very grim story, which is the couple that killed the baby, Finlay Bowden, have been sentenced to life. Now, this is the terrible story of the child, 10 months old, brutally murdered by his parents. In some ways, you think, well, why is that a story? But the reason it's a story for me is as the revelations have become clear, it's obviously that this is one of the things that happened under lockdown, which was that normal care for children was just suspended. And I think it was a hidden story of lockdown that we didn't know enough about, which was we discovered that the way they checked on the child's welfare was doing things like Zoom meetings or team meetings or whatever. They never saw the child. They actually asked the parents to send photographs of the condition of the house because they didn't go and visit. Now, lockdown happened for all sorts of reasons, but one of the things that should never have happened was that emergency services, such as child protection, were effectively suspended, and adults said, oh, no, it's too frightening to visit that house, so we won't do that. Can you imagine? So
could I just stop you there when they said it's too frightening to go into their household? So how did they think the child was dealing with that? It was too frightening.
No, but they were frightened of a virus.
COVID.
But they were frightened of a virus, and all I'm saying is that they could have made arrangements to see this child, and we know there are other children who were murdered.
Exactly.
But one of the things that has become clear, and the report has said it is, this is probably the tip of the iceberg. So we know of the children that were murdered by their parents during this terrible time. What we don't know are the children who suffered neglect because effectively they were abandoned by the state. And I'm just saying that we can now look back and say retrospectively, and some of us said it a bit more during, that lockdown, in fact, created a situation in which people's lives were put at far greater risk than anything the virus threatened us with.
I'll go back to that point about the households being too dangerous, because in the past that has been used not to go in.
Right.
Right? But you're right, added onto that, there then was the excuse, you might say, that they couldn't go in because of the bubbles and because of the lockdown and because...
And I understand the individual social workers are in a difficult situation, but what I think is unforgivable in many ways is that these services were told that their welfare, and we even saw it with teachers and pupils, wasn't it? Your welfare should stop you doing a job which is an urgent, necessary job to do.
But didn't they also say we should be protecting vulnerable children, or those of critical workers, as it were, did have special sort of concessions in a way, which should have happened?
Well, they told us that they were carrying on with social services, but we now discover that they were actually only carrying on in that social distance, keep in a bubble type way, which led to... So I just wanted to... It's a tragedy. Children will be killed by parents, sadly. It happens, right? Well, I'm glad they've got life.
It happened a lot more under lockdown.
But it happened a lot more under lockdown, and we should not forget.
Well, I think Claire's absolutely right. There are statistics come out. There are literally tens of thousands of children who are missing, who've just fallen off the radar of the state because of lockdown, and that really worries me. That this is, that we're going to see some horrible things emerging. So I think that is one of the key lessons to learn. That this is one of the very, very difficult and unfortunate consequences. And if we ever pray we never have another pandemic, but that this should firmly be borne in mind.
Wasn't this an inevitable consequence? I mean, if you're going to basically just say we're going to suspend everything in terms of and deal with COVID, this isn't something that couldn't be foreseen. This seems to me to be an inevitable consequence, and it was as if the state didn't really care. Well, I think this was less important than catching COVID.
And I think that's a big lesson, actually, not just when dealing with a pandemic, but for politicians generally. Tackle one problem, it's the law of unforeseen consequences, isn't it? Well, those consequences can be seen, and people should spend more time thinking them through.
And your story?
Well, actually, it's not dissimilar in terms of... It's anger as Sunak kills off Johnson's social care reforms, but it's another unintended consequences. And we could just replace this headline with anger as Johnson kills off May's or May kills off Cameron's. Frankly, this isn't just an issue for this government, because Labour didn't tackle it when it was in power either. This is about how we put in place long-term plans for dealing with long-term care for older people. It matters. Every family is facing this. What do you do about parents as they get older? How do we support them? And yet every government is just knocking it into the long grass. And so it seems that Sunak doesn't like what Johnson said. And it's now, I think, getting on 15 years since there was a big report about how to deal with this by Andrew Dilnot, the expert, and yet we still haven't got anything in place.
Short-termism.
Exactly.
What is the solution, Matthew?
Well, I mean, the solution I actually think is that we need... and I know this sounds a bit, this can sound trite, but I actually think this is one that does need a bipartisan approach. I think we do. Royal commissions have fallen out of favour, but we need one that politicians would abide by. Or in Ireland, what they've done, on big issues, is they've done these public assemblies where you get a representative sample and get people to thrash it out, and then that pushes the politicians on the spot.
Isn't the House of Commons a representative assembly?
Well, you would hope so. You would hope so, but it's avoided the issue. Come on, you two. I mean, remember the Alzheimer's tax?
Maybe it is a royal commission in a way. Maybe it is this, as you say, cross-party, because otherwise nobody wants to pick up the bill.
I mean, what do you think about it?
Because somebody's got to pay.
Because what people feel is very unfair is that they save up, they do the right thing all through their lives and whatever, and then they end up having to hand over everything, including the house, to pay for their care, whereas somebody who hasn't saved anything or hasn't acted responsibly gets it all for nothing, and that creates a massive resentment. So what do you think?
Well, first of all, I don't know what the solution is, but I do agree. I mean, this happened with my family. It's happened to so many families, hasn't it? We had to sell, my mum's house and everything to pay for the care. The whole set of circumstances is just too grim for so many people. And it's not even so much the resentment; it's just the whole thing that you can end your life like this, and that somehow there's no system in place, and it feels like you're paying a fortune. But Somebody has to pay for this. It's not as though I'm
sort of agreed that there would be a cost, but it would be capped at a certain level, and that beyond that...
But that's been abandoned.
But that's been abandoned by the Prime Minister,
And this is where I get the upset from my constituents, because all of a sudden they've thought, oh, it's not long to go, we'll be saved.
Yes.
You know, we've got something, it's just over the horizon, I can cope with a year or two more. And then they see it whipped away, as it were, from them. And I've already had people onto me straight away saying, I'm devastated.
I don't know, you know, I don't usually like party issues or dealing with this. But this is one of those ones which I do agree that when you actually listen to people who do know what they're talking about and have thought about this and have got plans, you do think it cannot be beyond... The ken of intelligent people to come up with some
ideas.
He's had some ideas.
Exactly,
I agree.
About insurance policies, different
Frank
things.
Field said a lot of different things.
Exactly, and I'm afraid we haven't picked them up. Phil, have you got a fun story? He usually does.
It's been a bit miserable, isn't it? I like to find something a bit of fun in the paper. Page 36 of The Sun, a woman of 102 has revealed her secret to a long and happy life. And that is, if everyone's wanting to know, on your edge of your seats, waiting to know what the secret of a long and happy life is, it's good sex and good sherry, according to John.
Well, I mean, did you follow this example,
This is Joyce Jackman.
I just changed the drink.
This is Joyce Jackman from Colchester, who is basically, that's it, she's widowed, and it reminds me of that Ken Dodd joke when somebody, an old lady went into the doctors and said that me and my husband, were having trouble with our sex life, and the doctor said, well, how old are you? And she said, I'm 86. I said, how old's your husband? I said, he's 89. And you went, oh, blimey, when did you work out that you had a problem with your sex life then? And she said, 3 times last night and 4 times this morning.
Oh, you've been waiting to tell that story on national TV for some years, haven't you?
I tell you, everybody says, why am I with this man? It's for those Ken Dodge.
But I have to say that... Actually, regardless
feeling chuffed with yourself.
Exactly. Regardless of the advice, it is actually always very inspiring when you get very elderly people who've got a zest for life.
Absolutely.
And you basically indicate...
what you're going to say.
No, zest for whatever. I don't know that I can actually live up to sharing. But I always like it, I mean, because I'm a smoker, but I always like it when those kind of 99-year-olds go, you know what I mean? I smoke every day, do you know what I mean? I have a whiskey, and here I am. And I always think there's hope for me yet.
A little bit of what you fancy does you good.
Exactly, and I'm still here, and you will still be with us in the next hour, giving us your stories of the week. But coming up, have we lost faith in our police? And if so, what's the alternative? Don't go away.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. Your views have been coming in thick and fast.
Yes, particularly about Philip Schofield. Colin says, I'm incredulous at the amount of airtime the media are giving to Philip Schofield. Who cares?
Dan says, ITV must have known the fact the man in question was moved to another show suggests that ITV must have had some concerns over the situation. Well said, Dan.
Now, this is, I think, Karen, Rachel and Ursula are all coming from a similar theme here, and I think it's an interesting perspective that should be aired. Karen says, hi, Esther and Phil, can someone explain why it's wrong for Philip Schofield to have a relationship with another man, or have I missed something? And Rachel says, does anyone lose their job over an affair these days? What people are doing to Philip Schofield is wrong. And Ursula says, why are we getting so worked up about two adults having a consensual affair?
And that's why we asked the question earlier of Sarah Robertson, is more going to come out? Because these points that these people, you know, Karen's making, Rachel and Ursula's making a fair point, and that's why I said, oh,
because, of course, people might think, well, this stuff seems to go on in TV all the time, doesn't it? Why pick on Philip Schofield, you know, where you have an older person...
And not just TV, probably.
But obviously, you know, ITV obviously had a duty of care to the younger employee. Were they doing their job properly there? I think there is.
But Dan hits on something. They moved him to another show, which does suggest they knew, and obviously they were concerned about something. Now,
right. Keep your perspectives coming, because we want to hear all shades of view about that.
The auntie of Harvey Evans, that's one of the two teenage boys who died on Monday evening in Ely, Cardiff, says she does not have faith or trust in the police.
Police have now confirmed officers were chasing the e-bike that 15-year-old Harvey and 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan were riding. The force says officers were in a van about half a mile away from the crash.
The Independent Office for Police Conduct is now investigating the force's involvement. Meanwhile, 9 people have been arrested in connection with disorder sparked by the incident.
Now, joining us to discuss whether we're losing faith in the police is Non-Executive in Security and Policing, Zoe Billingham, and the UK Director of More in Common, Luke Trill. Thanks both for joining us. Zoe, can I start with you? I mean, I've always been a staunch supporter of the police, as my local police divisional commanders would testify. But even my support's waning a bit. We obviously, people had their confidence dented by people like Wayne Couzens and David Carrick and the sort of wrongdoing of people in the police, which seems to be more widespread than people ever imagined. And then the final straw for lots of us has been the policing of the Just Stop Oil protesters, where, in effect, they've been stood watching them. And then if somebody comes along, a hard-working person who tries to get to work or get to hospital, they clamp down on them like a ton of bricks. And most people in the country think, what on earth's going on? So should we still have confidence in the police? If my trust's waning, I'm sure many people's is.
Morning, Phil. Hi, Esther. Good to see you both. Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is this. When you have a serial rapist and murderer operating in plain sight as a serving police officer, it's absolutely inevitable, isn't it, that confidence in the police are going to be rocked. And of course, these were metropolitan officers, but the effect is spilling across into policing in England and Wales. And, you know, like most women in work who are walking around in London late at night, I want to know that the police officer, the lone police officer in front of me, is there to protect me, not to predate on me. And like you, Phil, I have the similar qualms as most of your viewers, same thing. But I think what we have to understand is that the leaders of policing are beginning to outline a really kind of comprehensive plan about restoring trust. So Sir Mark Rowley, he was appointed on the ticket of restoring trust and confidence, has invested in an absolute industrial scale in rooting out rogue officers. The problem he's got, of course, is that as you lift more stones, you find more problems. And the problem for the Met Police is going to get a whole lot worse even now than it's going to get better, because we know that approximately 3 police officers from the Metropolitan Police are in court on trial a week at the moment. And of course, that's undermining trust and confidence.
Now, another issue has to be the lily-livered approach of police officers when it comes to Just Stop Oil protests. And we've got some video footage here of how the police were dealing with the protesters and how they were dealing with somebody who tried to move the protests in the UK. And so there's somebody chucking off the road some of the protesters because they're desperately trying to get to work. Other people are trying to get the kids to school. Other people are trying to get to hospital. And look how heavy-handed the police were with this person who's just trying to get about their daily lives and ignored the protesters. Now look at Germany. The police there, straight away, they take everybody off the road, get those protesters out the way, they're disturbing the livelihood of everybody else. And look, now waving on all of the other public to get to work, to get to school, to get whatever it is. So why are we so lily-livered? Why aren't we turfing those protesters off the road? That's upsetting the public, and they're losing faith in the police for that.
Is that directed at me, yes, Esther? Because I'm really happy to come in on this. Yeah, absolutely. Look, the policing of protest has always been complicated, hasn't it? And I know you, Esther and Phil, will absolutely support the right of the public to express freedom of expression and to protest. The trouble with protest, it's going to be annoying, it's going to be irritating, it's going to cause inconvenience. And the police have got a heck of a job, I think, to kind of strike that balance between maintaining the public order and the peace for those going about their lawful business and those that want to express a view. They don't get it right all of the time, but I think the police are really considered, very measured, and mostly very, very thoughtful about the way in which they address protest. It's not easy to be that person in the middle. It's not easy to go toe-to-toe with protesters and still maintain trust and confidence. And they're going to be damned if they do and damned if they don't. So I think we just got to have a bit of balance in all of this and, you know, not simply write it off as woke policing. I think they've got a darned hard job to do, and mostly they do it really well.
Zoe, let me bring Luke in. Luke, what's your view on this about whether or not the public are losing trust, whether you're losing trust in the police? I mean, obviously, the alternative to the public trust in the police is anarchy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But the reason that the public are losing trust in the police, and we track public trust in a range of institutions, and I can tell you that for the first time in our tracking, trust in the police has fallen below trust in banks. That gives you a feeling for how low trust in police has fallen. People are more likely to say they distrust the police than trust them. And part of the reason for that is these really high-profile, very worrying, disturbing cases that Zoe mentioned. But there's a wider point, and we hear this in our focus groups, and we get it in our polling, that lots of policing just seems to fail the common sense tests. Lots of your viewers, but also, you know, the wider public at large will see that Just Stop Oil protests, and the people who seem to be being punished are the people trying to get to work, as you said, trying to get to school, in some cases trying to get to hospital appointments. And then more broadly, we ask people, you know, how well do you think the police are doing on tackling antisocial behaviour? Nearly 70% of people say that they think the police have actually given up trying to solve crimes like shoplifting, burglary. And very often what we hear is the only reason I would call the police now is not to get them to solve a crime because I need the crime reference number to get my insurance. I think that's a really damning indictment of where public opinion on policing has got to. As Zoe said, there are lots of great individual officers, but the way the institution's operating and its priorities at the moment aren't matching what the public expects.
Luke, I just wondered where you felt the blame was lying for this. I mean, people say, well, the police have got, their resources are stretched. But, of course, if you misgender somebody, they seem to have no end of officers to come round and arrest you. Or if you're a pub and you've got some gollywogs on display, there's sort of 6 or 7 police officers turning up for that. So it doesn't seem that they're always lacking in resources. When I observed the police in my local constituency, I think there's a big disconnect between the rank-and-file officers and the higher rank officers who are more political. Do you think the blame lies with the rank-and-file officers not doing what the public want them to do, or the direction that they're being set by people in the higher echelons of the police?
I mean, certainly from our conversations with the public, it's this sense of misdirected priorities from the top. No one minds the police engaging in, diversity activity, and we know from Stephen Lawrence to Stephen Port how important it is that the police understand the different communities they serve. But they just think the balance has started to go slightly wrong, and so they see these high-profile stories of police at various diversity events, and they think, OK, I get that, but I don't see a police on my street corner anymore. Like, where's the balance? And there's also this sense that lots of policing has been pushed behind desks and off the street. People want to see, particularly in those hotspot areas, police patrolling, tackling antisocial behaviour and making sure that people feel safe in their communities.
Luke, Zoe, thank you so much. We've got to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed, both of you, for joining us this morning and giving us your perspective.
And GB News put out a tweet this morning asking, after the cases of Wayne Couzens, David Carrick and the lily-livered policing of Just Stop Oil protesters, do you still trust the police? And I can tell you the vote was 19% saying yes, a whopping 81% saying no. I think Luke hit on it there. The common sense factor had gone. So that was the GB News poll this morning for that interview.
Tell us what you think, whether you still trust the police or not. Now, Rishi Sunak has been warned the UK economy could be in recession next year as high inflation pushes interest rates to more than 5%.
Meanwhile, Germany has fallen into recession as consumers in Europe's biggest economy spend less.
Justin Urquhart-Stewart is economist and co-founder of Regionally, and he's in the studio with us now. Justin, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Morning.
It's been a big week, really, in the economic news. Obviously, the IMF did this massive upgrade in its forecast for the UK economy, and we see now that Germany is in a mess. So all those people who are saying, this is all due to Brexit, are now presumably eating their words at the moment, because that can't be the case. Why is it that Germany are doing so badly, and why the IMF have upgraded the UK forecast?
Well, be very careful of the figures, because what you're seeing here is a little 0.5% here, 0.5% there. These will all get adjusted in a few months, so we really don't know. All you can say, it's pretty flat. There's not much growth, and it's hardly really very surprising at the moment, because there's not much confidence. Now, Germany's got a particular issue, of course, because they can't actually work out where they're going to try and develop their economy. They've changed leadership. The leadership is vacillating. There's no clear direction in their economy, and so they're going to find it difficult. So, yeah, falling back into recession, quite a gentle recession. Whether we're going to be in one or not, well, actually, we may have already been in one, slightly, because the figures are all so narrow. Being in a recession isn't a disaster. It'll be low and slow. What you've got to do is actually make sure that you've got enough confidence for people to invest in to go out. And that's the worrying figures you see in the papers today, that actually now we're seeing gilt yields, which I appreciate doesn't mean very much to many people, but actually what it's showing is people outside Britain don't trust our finances at the moment. Therefore, I will not invest in Britain until I can start seeing some proper control over the finances.
I'm going to go back to that word you just said then about the recession, because I thought it was a startling statement that a chancellor would say that he doesn't mind a recession if it got inflation down, he's saying. But for other people, the big R word, recession, we don't want to hear. No. And we don't want to see interest rates going up if that's how you're going to control inflation, because that's a lot of heartache for people like you and me with a mortgage.
I was stunned by that. Hearing a chancellor saying, yeah, OK, we'll have some recession. You don't say that. No, we're going to have some growth. That's what we're going to have to do. There may be some pain going through. Yes, of course, we're going to see, as a result of this, interest rates are probably going to have to go up. They should have gone up earlier. The Bank of England, as we've mentioned before, were frankly not paying attention. And when they did start paying attention, coming up with some very strange language, which didn't exactly encourage people either. Inflation has to be hit and hit hard and bring it down, because the damage it does to the economy is really appalling. However, what you can see is already it's starting to come down, and it's really got to wait for the food areas, those core areas, to start coming, and it will in the next few months.
But inflation's the job of the Bank of England, not Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor. I don't know why he got involved. Shouldn't he be looking at getting people into work?
Well, and actually getting more investment coming in and making sure that growth is there. Whatever you think of Ms Truss, actually, what fact she was focusing on growth was right. How she was going about it was completely wrong. Where do we get growth from? Look at the areas where growth is already starting. And you can see that in smaller high-tech companies. But already they're suffering from the fact that actually there's a bit of a credit crunch going on at the moment. Banks are worried. Why? Because am I going to lend out? Because I'm not too sure this is going to be a good economy. So I tell you what, I won't do that for the moment. As soon as you're in that position, you're deliberately holding back potential growth in the economy. He needs to be leading from the front and saying, short-term issue, yes, long-term, better. This is what we're going to be doing. I want you out there lending money now.
I think it was about 30 years ago when John Major said, if it isn't hurting, it isn't working, and he got castigated for saying that, for not understanding the difficulties that people were going through. The increase in the IMF forecast, albeit that taking your point of view that we're talking small numbers either way, but that you can see a battle already developing between people who are saying this is a vindication actually of what Liz Truss was saying and doing, and that the IMF forecast is a vindication of what Rishi Sunak has done since he came in and took over. Which of those two camps would you be in if you're in either?
Well, certainly I'm afraid Ms Truss, I'm afraid, doesn't get it at all, because, frankly, what she was doing there was misleading. And you don't mislead finances, the city, because, frankly, and I don't mean the UK city, I mean internationally, people looked at that and said, this does not make sense. Are you mad? So, actually, we are on the right track. The pain, of course, we've known this for over a year. As interest rates go up, the people who are going to suffer most, as you were just talking about with mortgages, those who now suddenly find they're remortgaging, they've gone from 2%, they've more than doubled. And that's very painful indeed. And leave aside then the ordinary cost of living going up anyway. So we need to have more flexibility in here to give people that chance. And above all, show them that there is a light here. Things will be getting better. Don't keep on telling me it's doom and disaster. Inflation up, interest rates up. What you need to be telling me is, actually, we're going to be seeing some growth. We're seeing it in these key areas. Hold fast. It will get better. Otherwise...
That's why we have you here, Justin, because you're this just bubble of positivity that we love in the studio, who also explains very clearly what's going on and what needs to go on. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, here's a question for you. Has the vegan bubble burst?
For some of us, it was never a bubble, to be perfectly honest. But Oatly, Nestle and Innocent Drinks were amongst those pulling plant-based products from shelves, as figures show. Even veganuary backfired.
Well, someone who looks and feels exceptional from her non-vegan, balanced diet is former Hollyoaks actress Davina Taylor. Wonderful to have you with us today. So, the vegan bubble, has it burst? I even think it was Bear Grylls who said, do you know what, I did the vegan thing for a little while and I wished I hadn't, or I'm off it now.
Well, good morning from Clitheroe, by the way, where I'm surrounded by beautiful farmland with sheep and cows, which I am very proud to say I consume. I'm a mother of 4, so I want to give my kids the most nutrient-dense food on the planet, and that, I'm afraid, is basically what we see in these beautiful countrysides. We have some of the best nutrition available to us because we have all this blooming rain. So we have naturally grass-fed animals that we should be eating and consuming for our mental health. It's got heme iron in, it's got B12. So if you're going to have plant-based foods, basically it's just glorified carbohydrates, which as soon as you start consuming it, it mixes with your saliva and it turns to sugar. So you pile on the weight. and you become very sort of lethargic, and it's quite addictive. So this vegan food is just what I call greenwashing. And if your great grandmother didn't eat it, I suggest you step away from it. So I've written 2 books about it, actually. I'm just going to give them a quick plug, because that's what I do. So my first book, It's Not a Diet, basically explains the reality of how I got really overweight eating these foods. And then my next book, Hack Your Hormones, which is out now, explains how it impacts your mental health, because your hormones are triggered by what sort of food you have. And it's just like, it's a con. It's an absolute con. We need these foods. And if anybody thinks that vegan lifestyle doesn't kill animals, I mean, just watch Watership Down. Do you remember that awful movie we watched in the 80s when all the bunnies get chopped up? That's what combine harvesters do. I mean, there is no death-free sort of diet. It's impossible to avoid. So if you shop local, like I do, there's loads of farms around here, cut out the supermarkets, cut out the factory farming, you can be rest assured that the animals have been raised with integrity and killed with dignity, with as minimal pain as possible.
Davinia, that book, it's the first book I'm more interested in. It's Not a Diet, the no cravings, no willpower way to get lean and happy for good, which I think was written for me. I saw a thing that said, I lost 4 stone, but still eat fry-ups and Chinese takeaways. Now, that sounds good to me. So how does that work? Because I'm up for that.
Right, okay.
Oh my, we've got a picture of you on the screen there.
Hormone release, that's what it is. So I have my carbohydrates at night because it triggers a carb coma. So if you think about having a sandwich during the day, by 2 o'clock, say at lunchtime you have a sandwich, by 2 o'clock that's turned to sugar and you're already shattered again. So it's about timing your carbohydrates. So basically, throughout the day, I have like a lot of fat and protein. And then during the nighttime, I ride that carb coma to bed. And what it does is it stops that addictive eating, which I've got quite an addictive personality anyway. So it stops that addictive eating where you're constantly seeking snacks all the time. So if you do have your Chinese takeaway, it's not constantly on your mind because you're not actually fueled by sugar per se. You're fueled by fat. Now, saturated fat is an actual superfood. And I do think over the next 5 years, the cholesterol hypothesis is going to be debunked. Already, the American Heart Association...
She's won me over.
Listen to this. The American Heart Association guidelines, where the rest of the world takes all of its lead, all the guidelines from, has now put a little paragraph in it that says saturated fat and dietary cholesterol is no longer a molecule of concern for overconsumption. But we've not done any press on it. So when your doctor says...
You've done it. You're doing that press.
Exactly. So bring out the butter, bring out the eggs. Let's go and have scrambled eggs, but save your bread for later on because it'll make you
I feel I've done a workout already.
Davinia, I want a bit of your energy. I want a bit of your energy and enthusiasm. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, the thing that I thought was interesting, because sometimes I have vegan food, but I just have vegetables. I don't buy the processed foods. I think that's the worst thing, those processed foods. Anyway, more on the Philip Schofield scandal bombshell next. We'll cross live to our reporter in White City Media Village.
And have we entered the age of vanity insanity? Behavioural psychologist Joe Hemmings will decide whether a tech millionaire injecting himself with his son's blood is taking things too far. See you soon.
Certainly is.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. We've got loads coming up, including reaction to the Philip Schofield saga. We'll be crossing live to our reporter at White City, formerly Media Village, of course, for the latest on that.
And have we entered the age of vanity insanity? Behavioural psychologist Joe Hebbins will decide whether a tech millionaire injected himself with his son's blood, which seems incredible to me, is taking things just a little bit too far.
I certainly think so. Plus, we'll meet a woman who trains up other women to be traditional housewives.
As always, we want to hear from you, so do get involved in the show. Email us on gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet us at gbnews. But first, your headlines with Tatiana.
Phil, thank you very much and good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. ITV says it's deeply disappointed by the admissions of deceit made by Philip Schofield. The TV presenter resigned yesterday after admitting he had an affair with a young male colleague, which he described as unwise but not illegal. He told the Daily Mail he lied about the relationship to his wife, colleagues, friends and agents. Mail on Sunday journalist Charlotte Griffith says people in the industry must have known.
There was a video of him having lunch in a cafe with this young man, although I think he was 18 at the time. So it was the worst kept secret. You have to take him at his word. You know, Holly must have asked him about this. People around him must have asked him about this and he must have lied. That's what he said. And that's all we know right now.
Well, GB News presenter and former This Morning host Eamon Holmes hit out at his ex-colleague, saying he's finally been caught out. On social media, he said 4 high members of ITV management knew what sort of man he was and never once took action to prevent him controlling or taking advantage of his position over young people. Showbiz reporter Ellie Phillips told us Philip Schofield's actions were more than inappropriate.
he's saying it's not illegal, but it's also about an abuse of power, because Philip Schofield is was the face of This Morning, in a massive position of power, and then you've got a runner who, in the scheme of things within the scene, within how it works behind the scenes, is much lower down the rung in terms of power. So it's about that power imbalance, I think.
The Home Office says it's working to resolve a nationwide problem with its electronic border control system. Air passengers trying to get away for bank holiday are facing delays following a technical fault affecting e-gates. The UK's biggest airport, Heathrow, says it's trying to manage queues and working with Border Force, which operates the gates, to fix the issue as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, passengers at the port of Dover are also experiencing delays following a French computer outage. The issue has now been fixed, but traffic chaos continues, with the port warning the current wait time is over an hour and a half. Queues of cars and lorries are stretching to 4 miles. The Post Office has issued an apology over the use of racist slurs during an investigation into the Horizon IT scandal. A Freedom of Information request uncovered a document where fraud investigators were asked to categorise suspects based on racial features, including the use of a racist term referring to individuals of African descent. The Post Office condemned the language as abhorrent. NHS Scotland has paid more than £160 million in compensation to patients since 2018. The Scottish Conservative Party says the health service settled 475 claims over the 4-year period. Some of the reasons for payouts included removing an ovary and testicle without consent, or a patient having their eye glued shut. The Scottish Government says the health boards must learn from the situation and make improvements. Detached homes account for nearly a third of home mover purchases. That's according to lending giant Halifax, which says the sales for this type of property rose from a quarter a decade ago. But they say semi-detached properties were the most popular in northern England, while flats came out on top in London. Property expert Christina Castellina told GB News the number of people buying detached homes have benefited from a rise in property prices.
This statistic is only for people that currently have a home already. So for a lot of these people, they've benefited from the rise in property prices. So they already have equity that they can carry forward. And again, if we just go back to, a lot of people are buying new builds, often the developer will actually pay the stamp duty. So there are incentives there.
And finally, a 6-year-old boy who's climbing 12 mountains for sick children is preparing for his final hike. Oscar Burrow from Lancaster's hoping to reach the summit of Ben Nevis, the highest mountain in Scotland, on Monday. He started his mission in October, and since then he's reached the top of Snowdon, the highest mountain in Wales, and Scafell Pike, the highest peak in England. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Tatiana. Now, Philip Schofield has quit ITV after admitting he had an affair with a younger male employee and lied to cover it up.
The ex This Morning host says the relationship with his junior colleague was unwise, but not illegal. In a statement to the Daily Mail, Schofield revealed he had met the man when he was a teenager and was asked to help him to get into television.
He's apologised for lying to colleagues, employers, the media and the public. And an ITV spokesperson says they're deeply disappointed by the admissions of deceit made by Schofield and confirmed it's cut all ties with the host.
Our reporter Theo Chikomba is at White City. Theo, what's the latest from there?
Yes, good morning. Well, it's just the day after he's released that statement last night. He released that statement through the Daily Mail. It's been a conversation which has been happening over the weeks, particularly starting off people asking about what's happening between the relationship between Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby, presenters who've been on that show for a very long time. Philip Schofield joined the show in 2002 and Holly joined him on the sofa in 2009, and he played a big part for her to land that role, and they've had a fantastic relationship on air during that time. And over the last few weeks, we've, of course, heard some of the rifts which have been happening behind the scenes and asking the questions, what does this mean for the future of the programme going forward? And in the last few days, we have seen different presenters, Dermot O'Leary and Alison Hammond, who've been taking the reins during this period. And this morning at White City, where the programme is normally filmed during the week, we've been asking people what they think. And this is what they had to say.
Yeah, I suppose it is, like, it's a shame. He's like someone that people I really liked and like looked up to, so yeah, it definitely is a shame.
I think so. I think he was a big part of ITV. Him and Holly were very close together. But it is what it is. Sometimes this is a blessing in disguise. It could be that he might need to move on and do something different now.
It's a real shame that it's happened like this, due to things behind closed doors. You never know what might happen in the future. Hopefully they can all rekindle, but I wish them all the best.
Well, speaking to some of the people here, there have been questions about who knew what and when, how much did they know and did they do anything about it, as we've seen in his letters. This is also what he said. The first thing I want to say, I'm deeply sorry for having lied to them and to many others about the relationship that I had with someone working on This Morning. I did have a consensual and off relationship with a young male colleague at This Morning, and of course he did apologise about misleading people. So there are questions about what the show is going to look like going forward, particularly at the moment. Holly is not on air due to half-term break, but once she returns, what does it look like? Who's going to be permanently sitting next to her? As Philip Schofield did highlight that he has resigned, and some of those further projects he was in talks with ITV and others will no longer be taking place. So many questions about what's going to be happening for the future of This Morning on ITV.
Theo, thanks so much for bringing us the latest from White City.
Now we're joined in the studio again by former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lazar and former MEP and director of Academy of Ideas Claire Fox. So starting with you, Matthew, you worked in daytime TV.
Absolutely, yes.
So just a question, will this show now have to go absolutely sort of line underneath?
Yeah, I think it's touch and go for the future, and I think in particular the ITV bosses who were issuing statements at the weekend which made Philip Schofield sound like Mother Teresa have got a lot of questions to answer, and particularly to the ITV shareholders about why they weren't handling this better. So I think the show probably can survive, but it's going to need a very serious reset, and I think that probably includes quite a big clear out of the senior team.
So that's people leaving. The
I think
show
people will
might
have to
go
leave.
on,
The show
as
might
they
go
say,
on.
but the
yeah,
people...
I think behind the scenes, I think the sort of the management will have to, you know, because clearly this... I mean, you didn't have to be a genius to know that there were certainly questions about Philip Schofield, even if they weren't yet answered, when you were writing statements at the weekend saying he was the best thing ever to happen in television.
Mm-hmm. Claire, your story of the week. You were centre in this story of the week. Well done, you.
A modest contributor, but I'm delighted to be so. So, front page of the Daily Mail today has Equality Chief Witch Hunt Probe put on ice. And this is about Kishwa Faulkner, Baroness Faulkner, as it happens, who runs the Equalities and Human Rights Commission. And she had clarified matters of law, which is her role, rightful role, when it came to single-sex provision, ensuring that everything from women's sports to changing rooms to refuges would be legitimate to exclude trans women. And the whole transgender debate, as we know, is toxic. So she does that. She rightly does that because she's actually clarifying what the law is. That's what you're meant to do if you run that. That's her job. But internally in the EHRC, staff put together a dossier accusing her of bullying and harassment and all the rest of it, coincidentally at the same time, with, oodles of accusations. People were very worried about that. But then, worse than that, Channel 4 did what could only be described as a hit job, using this dossier and not giving her fair reply. So quite a lot of us at the Lords signed a letter and wrote it to Channel 4, to Ofcom, saying, this is a witch hunt. This is the weaponising of a term like bullying or harassment for political ends, because the actual problem was that she was having difficulty with the staff who basically accused her of transphobia because you cannot and dare not offend the particular tenets, very narrow tenets of those who go along with gender ideology. And it's really good news. The EHRC have called off this investigation, which was spurious to say the least. There's an excellent article actually in the Mail by Ruth Deach, who knows her well. But I think why it's important is because we've just heard the Philip Schofield behind the scenes. You know, behind the scenes in a lot of institutions, there's this problem, often with the staff, threatening very senior people. If you say that, we're going to call you transphobic and bullying and so on and so forth. And we see the people who run everything from major publishing houses to banks backing off and kind of going along with this. Thankfully, Kishore Faulkner did not back off, but she's had a terrible time of it.
I mean, people would have thought, you know, you've prejudiced the investigation by doing these leaks. Is this a way now that people can undermine you, doing a leak, finding a sympathetic ear, which is what you're saying with Channel 4, and then you've built your story, you've got ahead of the curve with your story, which could prejudice the investigation, Matthew?
Actually, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point. And I think you're right, Claire, that the two stories, the Philip Schofield, actually are linked in a way you may not. So we've also seen the Strawbridges from Channel 4 with sort of different leaks about how they behaved on set and they didn't. I mean, I worked in television, as you said, for a very long time. I saw some fairly bad behaviour. I mean, nothing illegal, but, you know, sort of some diva-like behaviour from presenters. And now it's the other way around. Now, as you say, people can gang up on management by, you know, raising a red flag when it's not always the case. And I think it's what really worries me is that if we get into the stage where people are weaponising accusations of bullying, when there are genuine cases of bullying, it's the boy who cried wolf from our childhood.
Some people might say that this is what the civil servants have been doing to several government ministers, Matthew.
I mean, I think it's difficult, and I think that, you know, I think it was right that in terms of Dominic Raab that they were investigated properly, and not all of them were upheld. I mean, you know, not every accusation of bullying, not every accusation made against a senior person is upheld. Things need to be looked into, but they need to be looked into quickly. What strikes me is that these inquiries take, 3, 4, 5 months while people are left hanging.
But it's also the case that I get worried about, the setting up of the inquiries very often, because all I'm saying that we've got to be careful of here is that there are certain ways that you can destroy people's reputation by accusing them of, in this instance, transphobia and harassment and bullying. And we've actually been involved in the Lords of discussing the online safety bill, which I am very hostile to. 20% of it in terms of protecting children's brilliant, 80% of it's going to affect the free speech rights of all of us. But people keep throwing in this stuff about, well, we'll have another amendment in which we'll say you should ban harassment or you should ban bullying or you should take down things. And I keep saying, we don't even know what we mean by this. When you say hate, this could be used, and I actually use this example to say, well, if you just say anyone who's a harasser is dangerous, we're going to end up banning a lot of us because that's the use that we'll all be called harassers.
And your story?
Well, I think let's go on a slightly lighter note. This is about the 27,000 calories that we all consume through our alcohol intake. Now, this is bank holiday weekend. The weather, the sun is shining, and a lot of us are going to have a glass of wine in the garden or the pub garden over the next few days. To start with, anyway.
Everything in moderation.
Absolutely. But apparently, our alcohol consumption equates to over 300 kebab. That's almost a kebab a day that the average Brit is drinking. So I think, I don't want to be the raining on the bank holiday fun, but it's to be borne in mind.
Well, not so bad. There'll only be 3 kebabs if you just do it over the bank holiday.
Exactly. So maybe next week.
You say this is this is depressing for me.
Yeah. So maybe it isn't like maybe
and it's depressing for me. I'll tell you why it's depressing for me, because I don't drink alcohol. And so I need to lose weight, and I think to myself, I can't even do. I mean, it wouldn't be.
You haven't got the easy win.
I could cut out alcohol and I'd be slim. That'd be great, wouldn't it? But I'm overweight and I don't drink it. Where do I go?
Oh, I know, it's terrible. Yeah. But imagine what it's like.
That's where you go.
Exactly. One of my problems is I quite like the kebabs as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's like kebabs and a glass of wine, and I'm in trouble.
So
right?
Claire, you've got the ciggies.
I know. I'm basically
doomed.
The alcohol. And the thing about these things is, I know it's a light-hearted story, but there is something irritating about constantly being made to feel guilty about every single pleasurable activity in the world. Eating, drinking...
all the things you
For some of us, smoking. But you do think, stop it. I make these personal decisions myself, right?
But, Matthew, I was hoping you were going to talk about...
We've got to get it in.
More lords up north. I say more because we've got a baroness.
I was going to say, we've got four northerners. We've got four northerners. Very. We might not. Absolutely. So the story this week, that as the government, as part of its levelling up agenda, is going to ensure that more gongs of all kinds, from all the way through to peerages, go to people from the north to better represent the country as a whole. And that could
be our moment.
I was going to say. Now, of course, this goes nicely with the fact that we often hear. I mean, my favourite moment was a Labour advisor was being at the Labour North West conference in Blackpool and suddenly saying we haven't got a story, and so we were sitting in the bar of the hotel deciding where shall we put the House of Lords? Shall we put it? We'll have to put it in the northwest as we're in the northwest. Is Blackpool too? And I'm not making this up. I mean, it was a thick of it moment. I mean, it's when politicians want an easy headline, they say let's move the Lords to York or Manchester or indeed Blackpool. Yeah. But yeah, definitely more gongs for Northerners.
Well,
that sounds like good news to me.
Next time you're on the programme, we could all have been gonged.
We could all be sitting, we could all be sitting with Claire. We could all be enjoying our life in the Lords.
Let's be honest, it's as arbitrary as any other decision about who gets into the Lords, isn't it? I mean, you know, if they're going to do it via accent, it's, you know, in other words, the House of Lords is a ludicrous, constitutionally mad that people are appointed into the House of Lords for God knows what reasons. So I think if some of it's based on they're from the northwest and they've got an accent,
I mean, it's no more random than
being a bishop, hereditary, or in fact just being a mate.
In fact, your
or
grandfather was a mate of the king.
It kind of gets us a little bit further up the list, doesn't it?
Let's hope.
I'm all for it.
Matthew, thank you very much. Claire, thank you very much indeed. But coming up, we'll be crossing live to Parliament Square, where our reporter Olivia Utley will explain why there's protests there today.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. The time now is 11:23. We've got lots of your views coming in and we'll do them a little bit later on.
Now, Republic will be joining Liberty, Amnesty International and a large number of other organisations to protest in Parliament Square today.
It's in protest against the Public Order Act in Parliament.
Let's cross to Parliament Square to find out more from our reporter, Olivia Otley. What's going on, Olivia?
Hello, yes, I'm in Parliament Square. We're expecting the protest to start in the next 40 minutes, half an hour or so. There is a big police presence here already. I've spoken to them. They're expecting it to be a pretty big protest. Essentially, a lot of protest groups are coming together, including Just Stop Oil, Black Lives Matter, Amnesty, Republic, the anti-monarchy group, to express their general displeasure, it seems, at the Public Order Bill. Now, the Public Order Bill is a controversial piece of legislation which just passed its third reading past Royal Assent this month, which basically clamps down quite a lot on protest groups. So police have been given quite a lot more power to intervene when a protest takes place. For example, slow walking, a tactic used by Just Stop Oil in particular to great effect, or stopping the traffic by walking slowly down a London street, has now been outlawed. The practice of locking on, sticking oneself to other people or to buildings or to artefacts to make your point, has now been outlawed too. And it was on those grounds that a number of Republican protesters were arrested at the coronation, later it seems mistakenly, because they were carrying sort of glue and other implements used to glue oneself to an artefact, and police used the Public Order Act to arrest them. So it seems that these protesters today, they don't have a specific cause, they're not asking for something specific from the government, they are just expressing their general displeasure. Now that might be to put pressure on a Labour potential government to repeal the Public Order Bill if they got into power. So far, Labour haven't said that they would go as far as to actually repeal the Public Order Act. They've sort of expressed their dislike of it, but actually haven't said they'll repeal it. So that could be the aim of these protesters. But I think we're expecting it to be a pretty big protest, and it could get quite interesting.
Olivia Otley, thank you so much for that. I'm sure you'll bring us the developments throughout the day. I think they're probably just enjoying the sunshine, aren't they?
I mean, Just Stop Oil have got a cheek, haven't they, complaining about a Public Order Act that's come through when these are people who are ruining Chelsea Art Show, the snooker final, you name it, you know, on the roads, what they're doing. I mean, really, I'd say they had more freedoms than anybody.
It's a bit late as well. It's already passed, isn't it? It's passed through Parliament. It's done now. So there's no point in protesting now. It's already in law, so...
But I was going to say, not just the age of insanity, but have we entered vanity insanity? Tell us more, Phil.
Tech mogul millionaire Brian Johnson is so set on looking young, he's been injecting himself with his son's blood.
But is that taking the quest for youth way too far? Well, I reckon it is. Well, behavioural psychologist Joe Hemmons joins us now. Now, you will have seen this story in the paper. A tech multimillionaire has been doing loads of things to make him look younger, but now he's taking blood from his 17-year-old son, taking the plasma from it to inject in himself to stay young. A step too far, Joe?
Look, probably. You know, the quest for youth goes on to stay young, whatever you do. He's got millions, billions, whatever. He's in tech. He can do it. You know, I'm not against tweakments at all in terms of looking younger, even if it's having your hair coloured, whatever it may be. But I do think he seems to be not living any kind of life while he's attempting to obtain this youth. It's just very odd. He's going to sort of be the one on his own that's got this young body, this young mind. But actually, what's he doing in between time while he's doing all this? I wonder what he wants to achieve, I suppose. It's not just youth. He's like on some sort of mission to maybe prove something scientifically.
Well, we saw the 3 generations there, his dad, him and his son. And trust me, he didn't look any younger to me there. It certainly looked like there were 3 ages of the family. He's been spending £2 million a year on staying looking young, and it's his money. He can do what he wants. But I think this sharing blood or getting the plasma from a 17-year-old boy and then talking about it on social media. I think he needs social services, not social media.
Well, I certainly think he could probably do with a bit of therapy, to be fair. And as you say, he doesn't actually look any younger than his age. But maybe it's the insides he wants to remain young. Maybe he doesn't want to get sick. But, he clearly is obsessed with this now, isn't he? He just wants to prove something scientifically. No normal human being will go to these lengths. And I just find it extraordinary.
Joe, I mean, I don't know why he doesn't save the money and just ask me for my advice in looking young, to be perfect. He could save himself a hell of a lot of money, to be perfectly honest, but, maybe he'll stumble across that idea. But in all seriousness, is this something that, you're a behavioural psychologist, is this something that you look at it and you think, well, this is perfectly understandable and logical. If money's no object, it's logical that you'd go down this route? Or does what he's doing indicate a sort of personality flaw or a wider sort of depression?
I think in his case it probably does. Look, we've all seen cosmetic surgery come on a lot in the last decade or so, whether it's hair or your breasts or teeth or whatever it may be. There are far more access and availability to that sort of thing. And I understand people wanting that to be done. However, he is trying to do it from the inside out. He is trying to sort of, I think, break medical science in some ways. So I think he's got a very different mindset than just wanting to look younger. He actually wants to be younger and wants to live. I don't know if he wants to live in perpetuity or whether he just wants to live to be very old and still look good. You rarely come across mindsets like that. I would love to have him sitting on my counselling sofa and find out what he really wants and what he's doing this for.
Joe Hemmings, thank you very much indeed. You could certainly get a PhD if you had him on your sofa and you're analysing him. But coming up are traditional stay-at-home housewives making a comeback. But first, here's the news with Tatiana.
Esther, thank you. It's 11:30. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. ITV says it's deeply disappointed by the admissions of deceit made by Philip Schofield. The TV presenter resigned yesterday after admitting he had an affair with a young male colleague, which he described as unwise but not illegal. He told the Daily Mail he lied about the relationship to his wife, colleagues, friends and agents. GB News presenter and former This Morning host Eamon Holmes hit out at his ex-colleagues, saying he's finally been caught out. On social media, he said 4 high members of ITV management knew what sort of man he was and never once took action to prevent him controlling or taking advantage of his position over young people. The Home Office says it's working to resolve a nationwide problem with its electronic border control system. Air passengers trying to get away for the bank holiday are facing delays following a technical fault affecting e-gates. The UK's biggest airport, Heathrow, says it's trying to manage queues and is working with Border Force, which operates the gates, to fix the issue as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, passengers at the port of Dover are also experiencing delays following a French computer outage. The issue has now been fixed, but traffic chaos continues, with the port warning the current wait time is over an hour and a half. Queues of cars and lorries are stretching to 4 miles. You can get more on all of those stories and more by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Thank you very much indeed there, Tatiana. And now we'll be talking about traditional housewives. Are they making a comeback? You can't miss that. See you after this break.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. The time now is 11:35. Got some views here, Phil.
Go on.
Oh, OK then. Peter, as far as I can tell, every EU country immediately arrests and removes these Just Stop Oil protesters. People could miss flights, ambulances be delayed, lose appointments, etc. Why are our police behaving like this madness? This was due to the debate we did a little bit earlier about are we losing faith in our police? Just that, you know, these were not looking lily-livered when it comes to these protesters.
Ant says maybe we should just employ some German police.
Well, I hate to say
Good
this,
solution.
but we are employing lots of other foreign workers, so maybe the police would be a good way to start as well. And Darren said, how are protesters allowed to disrupt traffic and be protected by the police? People pay to use the roads, protesters don't. Something seriously is going wrong with our police. And, of course, we did our police poll, didn't we? Are you losing faith in the police? And it came back that it was a whopping, Phil? Was it 81% said yes, a whopping. That was our GB News poll today.
And we talked about veganism. David says, I'm just about to prepare some scrambled egg on oatcakes. There you go. Well done, David. Now, are trad wives, that's traditional housewives to you and me, making a comeback?
Well, our next guest is Alina Pettit, who says it's OK to choose to be a housewife and offers training and books on, as she puts it, the occupation that is a housewife.
Oh, we're delighted that Elena joins us now. Elena, do you think that women get pressured into going back to work, particularly when they've had children, when they otherwise don't really want to? Do you think they're going back to work maybe for financial reasons, but do you think they feel pressured to do so? There's a culture that pressurises them to do that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, aside from the fact that housewives are pretty much almost extinct because it's very hard for families to survive on single incomes, many don't want to go back to work. They want to stay home to raise their children themselves. They have to financially, but there is a cultural expectation. I personally have had experience of this. Particularly among my age group, I'm in my mid-30s, we were raised under a culture of career first. So, yeah, I think people are expected to go back to work because that's all we really see value in at the current juncture, really.
So when you say you promote traditional housewives, what's the reaction you get from women when you say, well, maybe divide it out, maybe from women and men, but I'm intrigued, what's the reaction you get from women?
Well, it falls into two camps. There are women who are currently housewives or really love being at home, and they come out and support and they say, thank you for speaking up. I don't think we're making a comeback. I think we've always been here since the dawn of time. It's just that culture, the media, there's no positive representation of these traditional families, however that may look, whether you're, I don't know, remarried or living in any particular which way. It's just, one person goes out to work, the other provides the caregiving. But there is plenty of hate out there, mostly from young women who have no experience of trying to, quote unquote, have it all, this pressure to balance a career and the, family life.
How does that hate manifest itself?
Oh, social media, absolutely. I mean, it's a brilliant tool for kind of getting a message out there, but it's also a wonderful tool for people to kind of hide behind and I think project their fears. I grew up under kind of a bit of a pressure to go out to work. That was the only option there was for me. So women are still, in a way, being told what to do. And rather than them standing up in their feminism, which is what they claim they are, where feminism to me is about making choices that, make you happy, they think that I'm telling them to stay home, and it's not about that. Feminism for me is about a woman making the right choices for herself and by extension her family. It's not about only...
Well, you always say, don't you, Phil, you're a traditional feminist.
Yeah, I think in some... I mean, Elena, what I always thought feminism used to be about was about saying to women, look, you can do what you want. Don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do. You do whatever you want to do. And it was sort of a reaction to maybe men telling women what they could and couldn't do. The thing I don't like about what I describe as modern-day feminism is it seems to have gone from maybe men telling women what they can and can't do to these modern-day feminist women telling women what they can and can't do and sort of frowning upon women if they make a decision that the modern-day feminist doesn't approve of. So how do we get over that? How do we get back to what I think feminism was always about and put these sort of what I call modern-day feminists back in the box and say, look, let women choose what they want to do again?
I know, it's funny, isn't it, Phil? I think women have become what they feared in the beginning about, being told what to do. Now they're telling each other what to do, which is, it's really sad. I don't have the solution, unfortunately. We live in a culture that says you can be anything you want to be who you want to be, unless it's traditional, unless it looks like something that perhaps might be a relic of the past. I think we really need to, if people are confessing that we are an accepting society, then we have to accept everything, including those who want to have a normative, quote unquote, conservative family life, traditional.
Well, Elena, thank you so much for standing up for what you believe in and joining us on the show this morning. We certainly appreciate that.
And here for choice.
Absolutely.
That is what it's about. And obviously that's why I married you, because you were a traditional feminist. British Cycling have banned trans women from competing in female categories.
Female races will now be for those whose sex was assigned female at birth.
Flona McKenna, who is sports director at Fair Play for Women, joins us now. So are you pleased with this decision?
Yes, I think it's about time that women had fairness in cycling. I think it's taken a long time, actually. You know, these rules were adopted so casually years ago to let certain males into the female category, and it's been quite a battle to restore what we all know is a common sense approach to sport, which is to say, if you are female, if you're born female and you don't have the advantages of male puberty, then you need a protected category. Otherwise, you'll have no chance in sport. So we're really glad to see it.
Now, Fiona, it's caused controversy from a transgender cyclist called Emily Bridges, who says this is genocide by British cycling, was the quote that I saw, and ends her chances of competing at the Olympics next year. Now, the bit that struck me was that Emily Bridges says that she has no advantage over other women racers, and that the previous requirement that riders in the female category had testosterone levels below 5 nanomoles per litre for 12 months ensured that there was fairness. So what do you say to what Emily Bridges has to say?
Well, unfortunately, that's absolute nonsense. You know, there are 16 or 17 studies now published around the world that show that if you reduce testosterone in a male body, you diminish their performance a little bit, but you in no way remove the male performance advantage, because not much changes when you reduce testosterone. And so that's why an open category is a great solution. Emily's not banned from competing. Emily was a very good cyclist, was a world junior GB record holder as a male, and is free to continue to compete in the open category, and that's how it should be. But it means that women and girls will not have their chances prejudiced by having to race against males. So when people say there's no evidence that, you know, Emily has an advantage or we need to do more science, we don't. We all know that you cannot reverse male puberty, and so this is the only fair solution.
Now, Fiona, I suppose the one caveat from your happiness about this, I guess, might be that it only applies to competitive events. It doesn't apply to non-competitive events. What do you think of that? Is this something that needs addressing, or is the decision a reasonable compromise?
Well, you know, we shouldn't be compromising female fairness and safety, should we? Why are we starting with a compromise where we've got a certain proportion of males who are allowed into female events? What I say is there should be open, there should be mixed, but if you advertise a women-only bike ride, as British Cycling does, then it should be women only. And I think it's a daft approach to take to say that, as they have done, that non-binary people are welcome in the women-only breeze rides. Why would a non-binary person want to be in a women-only event? We hear from lots of women who have good reasons why they want to be in a women-only event. And I think they should be allowed to have that. So no, there's more work to do here to restore what is a reasonable expectation for women and girls.
Yeah, and it was always about, you know, a fairness at the end of the day. And you've been on a long journey, haven't you, to get this? I mean, I always used to say, gosh, why have we made it all so complex? If it was boxing, you'd have different weights and different categories to make sure that the two people competing against one another had a fair sort of chance. So it does seem it's been a rather long journey you've been on to get this matter sorted.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, these rules that it let males into the female category were adopted so casually, and then we're having to fight so hard just to get back to what we all know is a common sense approach. And it's important to say that even in boxing, which has always had weight categories, they've also always had sex categories. Because if you put a man and a woman of the same weight, whether they're big or small, if you put them against each other, the man is always going to knock 10 bells out of the woman. And we all know that. And so it's, you know, you can't just say, forget sex, let's do it on some other criterion like size or weight, because that wouldn't be fair on women.
Fiona, thank you so much. I'm sure lots of our viewers will agree wholeheartedly with what you've been saying. That's Fiona McKenna, Sports Director for Fair Play for Women. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, for the latest sports and showbiz news, we're joined by the wonderful Hayley Palmer and Chris Scudder there. So, Hayley, let's start with a bit of showbiz.
There's only one story in town, isn't there, in the showbiz world, Hayley? Philip Schofield.
Well, yes, this is true. This is true. I know you've been talking about it this morning. I actually did my work placement at this morning, and Loose Women. And I did actually sit and watch. And, you know, they were very professional, I have to say. Well, this is going back about sort of 5 years now. But I have been reading statements this morning. I know ITV's...
So did you not see anything? Did you not see the boyfriend? Did you not...
No, I didn't see anything. No, I have to say. It was all very professional when I was there. So
and nobody was talking about anything?
No, they weren't. But, you know, I was a work experience girl. Maybe, you know, I wasn't in that...
You might have been offered a date by somebody because...
No, I certainly wasn't, but it was going back some time now. But yeah, I mean, ITV have said the relationships we have with those work are based on trust. Philip made assurances to us, which he now acknowledges were untrue, and we feel badly let down. And I know all eyes are on Holly now, aren't they?
Is the show over? Sort of a quick answer, is the show over?
I would think so, yes. Do you think that?
I mean, I think that I can't see the chief executive of ITV surviving. That's my view. But lots of our viewers, interestingly, have been saying, well, hold on a minute, you know, from what's on the public domain, Philip Schofield is, you know, it was young, but he was an adult. He's done nothing illegal. You know, relationships between older people and younger people happen all the time.
Affairs happen all the time.
And you know, husbands who do that don't always come out openly when they're married and all the rest of it. Why particularly pick on him? I mean, lots of viewers have been...
And there's other people saying, why are you giving so much news coverage to this chap, that relationship and that programme? So there's lots of different views coming in. They're not all against it. They're not all hostile to Philip Schofield. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Tina Turner, because I was so upset to hear this news. I know, Esther, we went to see the show, didn't we?
We did. I love Tina Turner. You love Tina Turner, so we have to
My mum loves Tina Turner.
Who will be simply the best at Wembley today? And you know, Hayley, look at those colours she's wearing today. Sky blue and white. Don't think she's a Man City fan.
Must be Coventry.
It must be Coventry. Is that an omen today for the big player, for the richest game in world football? In terms of, you know, whoever goes up gets roughly minimum roughly 170 million quid. And when you're a club the size of Luton or Coventry, that is an absolute fortune. But the trouble is, you know, whoever goes up, you suddenly get circled by all the sharks who feed on the Premier League, all the agents and all the players who demand more money. So it's a kind of poison chalice, if you like. And, you know, you're from the northwest. Everton could be dropping down the plug hole tomorrow. You know, if they don't beat Bournemouth, I think they probably will.
You said this actually a little while ago. You said Everton's had a few bad seasons. They've been close to relegation a few times. I want them to stay up, by the way. I want them to stay up. But it is a dangerous time for them.
And you're a Liverpool fan, aren't you?
I'm a Liverpool fan, but I still want Everton to stay up.
But, you know, I mean, listen, Everton have lost the financial fair play rules. They've broken the rules by miles. Over 3 years, losses of 371 million quid. That's astounding. That's all to come down. If they get relegated tomorrow and there's talk of a takeover, I don't know where it leaves the club, because those who might invest might well pull out. So, I mean, the pressure on them tomorrow is going to be immense. They've got to win their last game pretty much, or else they risk Leicester and Leeds.
And to be fair, they've been quite good when they've been under pressure. They've won games I wasn't expecting them to win.
Their home form's been terrible, but I mean, it's happened to them 3 times in the last 3 decades, and they've always survived by the skin of their teeth. But they're playing a team tomorrow in Bournemouth who, you know, people, they'll beat them. But I think that will work against them. I really do. I think it's going to be a really tense day. And, you know, anything could happen, frankly.
So go on, tell us about as well, now that we know the colours you're on, and that could be an omen for the football, for Coventry, tell us about Tina Turner.
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually interviewed the girl that played Tina Turner in the West End at the time. She's called Chanel Haynes. And I found it really interesting interviewing her because she always knew that she wanted to play that role. And she manifested that role. And she actually wrote to them and said, I am your next Tina Turner. It's just incredible to sit there with her and hear it all. But, you know, Tina Turner, she sold over 100 million records, hit after hit, 12 Grammy Awards, 3 decades of sellout tours. And she's an absolute icon. I was honestly really, really gutted to hear the news. And,
well,
you know,
this, I think, is a fabulous picture, and it is Mrs. T with Mrs. T, as they put it. They were together at a set of awards. Both of them were awarded, and I have to say, Tina Turner's words were fantastic. She said how honoured she was to be in such great company as they were both honoured. But I just thought that was a fabulous photo.
That was the second coming in the sort of the 80s. I used to like, you know, I remember Icon Tina Turner, Nutbush City Limits. Well, I loved that as a kid, you know. Her career was very split, wasn't it?
The fact that I think for women as well, she's such a role model. It was because
she really is.
she
what
got
she went through with Icon
over.
Turner,
Yeah,
you know,
so what she went through
to a lot of women, and what she went through in her life with her sons as well. She had 4 sons. She's lost 2 of them. You know,
Really?
I was reporting on that before. It's absolutely devastating. And I think that's why it hit us so hard.
And Chris, finally, other sport that's going on. There's the rugby final between Saracens and Sale today. There's the Monaco Grand Prix.
Yeah, it all comes down to finance. Club rugby, you know, we all love international rugby, but club rugby, I mean, it's been a terrible year. It's the final today, Sale against Saracens, 2 fairly healthy clubs. But this season, they've lost 2 clubs, Worcester, the Wasps dropping out. London Irish are going to follow quite possibly as well. It's all about finance, and club rugby's in a real mess in the Premiership. And you can relate that to the football clubs who are struggling as well. So football and sport and finance, it's big business. You know? If you get it wrong off the field.
Esther's a big Sale fan.
Are you? They're going to win. They're going to win today.
Oh, I haven't got inside
Ford.
information, but let's hope so.
I think Saracens will win personally, but.
Well, look, Chris, that's fabulous, and hopefully have you back. Hayley, fantastic. See you again soon. But look, I have to tell you, earlier on we put out a Twitter poll asking, after cases such as Wayne Couzens and David Carrick, along with the Lily-Livered policing of Just Stop Oil protesters, do you still have trust in the police? Well, the final result of that poll, almost 19% of you say you still had trust in the police, with just over 81% saying you do not have trust in the police. That is quite incredible.
Pretty comprehensive, isn't it?
It absolutely was. There's no confusion in that one, is there? But look, that's all we've got time for today. We'll be back at 10 a.m. next Friday. But next up is Martin Daubney.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. The bank holiday weekend hasn't started off too badly for many of us, and high pressure is staying with us and helping to keep things fairly settled across the board. We do, though, have this cold front lingering in the far north, and that is pushing its way into parts of northwest Scotland, providing a few light outbreaks of rain and drizzle that will continue to push their way across the Northern Isles and through the Highlands as well. But for much of England and Wales, there's a good amount of sunshine once the early low cloud and mist has cleared its way off, and it should be a fairly pleasant and fine Saturday for many of us. Temperatures responding in that